Hello, YouTubers! National Master Luke Calhoun here. I'm a nationally board certified teacher and a titled chess player. And I just finished a speed run, and now I'm doing advanced strategy. Thanks to Kodim Global, who recommended it. I'm just doing user requests for the YouTube channel because I ran out of my speed run. I have some other pending requests, but if you put something in the comments asking for something, I'm looking for things to do week to week. So give me something to do. So the request was for advanced strategies without any description of what. So I'm going to do doubled pawns. They're one of my favorite advanced strategies. So double, toil and trouble. Watch them double. Watch them make trouble. Cauldron stuff. All that. For those of you who don't know what double pawns are, the basics before we get into the advanced would be just what they are and what they're generally considered. So this is the Roy Lopez, and this is the Roy Lopez exchange variation. And those are double pawns. See how they sit on each other? So like Billy here is trying to move, but Charlotte here is in the way. And so Billy's like, hey, I'm walking here. And Charlotte's like, you stay behind me, you little brat. Don't push me. I'll move when I'm good and ready. And because of that mobility challenge, they're generally considered bad when you first play chess. Like around like the 1,000 range, you just get this sense that double pawns are going to ruin your life. Like you're going to lose games if you allow your opponent to double your pawns. And then strangely, you're watching Grandmaster games and they're allowing double pawns. When should I allow double pawns? When should I allow double pawns? What are the, and then you get this binary thinking like, okay, double pawns I thought were bad, but maybe they're good, maybe they're bad, or sometimes they're good, which is which. And then the answer is yes, they're usually good and bad. And understanding which part of them is most important in a position is really critical and really advanced. So let's start with the negatives. Let's harp on them and then talk about what they offer you and why you might want them. So we're going to start with this is the old way of playing the Roy Lopez exchange. Bobby Fischer had Castle Kingside as a main line, but we're not really looking at the opening here. What I'm trying to get you to do is focus on the pawns. So imagine for a second that all the minor pieces are off the board, that they don't exist. If they didn't exist, and say we wanted to have a race. So you might count how many white has over here. So white has 1, 2, 3, 4, and doing the count, 1, 2, 3. White has an extra pawn over here, which means white's going to eventually be able to create a pass pawn. They're just going to run, and then eventually, and I'll show that. So say black's trying to no, don't create a pass pawn. Too late. This pawn is running for glory. Now in this position, there's a king on the way, but don't mind that. The point is, the pawn can eventually run for glory on the side where you have a pawn edge. Now we turn to the other side of the board. Black has 1, 2, 3, 4. White has 1, 2, 3. So maybe black can create a pawn thing. So let's get the knight out of the way so it's just not bothering us and see if black can make things. So black plays here, white plays here, here, here. And then black is like, I'm coming for you. And then white's just moving the king, doing a little dance on the other side of the board. And I'm coming for you. Moving the thing, takes. I got stuck. And this is the problem. Whenever they have to compete in a sack race, it's just miserable. The person's get out of my way. I can make a pass pawn, but they can't. So one thing to look at when you have a pass pawn in assessing how bad it potentially is it on a side where you have a majority? In this case, it is. And that's really annoying. If black did not have the 2 bishops, they would be worse in this position. As a matter of fact, they do, and they will not just trade blindly if they know what they're doing, because that king and pawn game is going to be worse. Let's compare that to an opening in the Philidor where you take double pawns. So d4, knight f6, knight c3, e4, takes, bishop c4, usually take the queen first, bishop c4, bishop e6, takes. So these are double pawns too. But if you look really closely, you'll notice that black has 4 over here and white has 4 over here. So therefore, no one has an advantage. So black doesn't need to move the pawns. They can just sit back and chill. They can be like, I'm chilling over here. This is my beach. So white, if you want to make something, you can move. My double pawns are happy just kind of sitting behind this pawn. They don't need to do anything else. And that makes a big difference. And you can see the dividing line now is here. And so it's even on both sides. And that's one thing to assess when you talk about the immobility of the doubled pawn. Is it immobile and you need to push it? Or is it immobile and you can chill? And there's a big difference between them. Now, there's still disadvantages in that those pawns can be attacked and they can't run away, but there's not at least a mobility problem in terms of like making a run for it. Okay, so those are the negatives, is that you can't really run them and they can be attacked and they can't run away. They get very stuck and they get mad at each other. You can mitigate that by moving them away from each other. So two doubled pawns that like stretch out don't have any mobility problem, because the one at the very flank of the line is happy to keep marching forward, and the one at the very top of the line is also happy. So that's why you'll see people stretch out the double pawns like a rubber band, so that there's less mobility issues as a result. Okay, let's look at the advantages, because a lot of people don't know that there are advantages. So I'll just play like a normal opening. We'll say like bishop c4, bishop c5, d3. Let's just say d6. And let's play the very interesting move, bishop e3. A lot of club players like to play this on g5, but this is totally possible. And then black can take. And let's just say we develop our pieces and we get like a position like this one. Okay, so the doubled pawns. One, they still are immobile. Notice this pawn can't move, and so the problems are still real. The knight can attack this, and we're going to have to babysit it with a queen. It's going to be super annoying. It'll be like, I have better things to do with my life than babysit you. And that's still real, but there are advantages, and that's what I want to talk about now. Whenever you create a doubled pawn, it gives you a gift. It just hands you over a gift. And that gift is always an open file, because two pawns always leave one file without a pawn on it. So see this file here? There's no pawns on it. So that rook is just staring down. Rooks, like, when I was like younger, I thought that rooks, like, to attack people with rooks, you got to like move it up. So I'd grab my rook and I'd be like, yeah, I do this at you. I thought but that's not how rooks roll. That's a misunderstanding of the rooks. The rooks, like, they like to lurk back and they just stare. They're like the James Bond, like, and they're like in a Care Bear stare. And if they're staring down a long hallway, kind of like The Shining, the twins from The Shining, kind of like that, and they stay back here and they just like emit this toxic horror stare down the board, that's when the rooks are on their prime. They can't be taken because they're so far back, and yet that glare is something to be worried about. Notice that black doesn't have the same. So if they put the rook here, then this pawn is going to be like, hey, rook, are you staring at me? Are you staring at me? And it's like, get out of the way. Go double yourself. I got attacking to do. But they won't be able to, because their pawns aren't doubled. So a doubled pawn, one way to look at it is it's a rook enhancement. Even though it weakens the pawn, the rook becomes really good with the file that it opens up, or at least some of the time. So one thing to ask yourself about, like, weighing those pros and cons is the file that opened up. First question, is it on a side of the board that you want to play on? So for example, if all the pieces, like say like white had moved up all their pieces over on the king side, they're like engaged in this like raging attack, and they double pawns over here and open up the C file. Well, they're not playing on that side of the board. And it'll be a nuisance to like reroute everyone, like, everyone, let's go over to the queen side. That's not going to be very helpful. So in that case, the open file is inconsistent with their plan. It's not a good idea. But if we look at this position, we have at least the bishop and the knight are capable of going on to the king side. The queen can come over to the king side. So there is a consistency. This open file does help on a side that white might want to play for. And in fact, may dictate which side of the board to play on, given that white has an advantage there with the rook just being able to see. So that's a question, is like, is it where you want it to be? Do you want a rook there in the first place? The other question is, what is the opportunity cost? So if you imagine the same position, but imagine there's all these pawns traded. So everything I'm highlighting in red, imagine is off the board. And imagine like none of the rooks are immediately hanging or any like tactics like that. What would happen is these files would be so open for rook location that black wouldn't care that white has one more. Unless white has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rooks, there's not enough rooks for all the files. There's an abundance of files. So creating one more open file when you already had plenty is like someone with 1,000,000 toys getting a toy for their birthday. It's like, it's not very important. They already have 1,000,000 to play with. It doesn't actually work. And then they'd be much more concerned about all the negatives of the double pawns. So for that reason, a lot of double pawns are really good in the beginning because these rooks can't breathe. They need pawn trades to really see. And so if you get doubled pawns very early, the rook can really, really see, and later they cannot. And that makes a big difference. And that's why, like, the position is early enough that there's it's a desert wasteland without any water, and this is the one oasis coming out of it, and that's going to make the double pawn super strong. The last thing I'm going to talk about is a defensive. So that's like offense. Your rook becomes enhanced. But what about like your ability to obstruct their rooks? So let's go back to that Philidor position, because there it's not just about their immobility, it's about restriction. So like we go here, this is a common main line in the Philidor defense, this in-game, and black gets these double pawns. And I already said that the pawns can chill, right? But there's another thing to note, which is when the pawns move in this direction, they change which file they're guarding. So if you look at this file right here, defensively, black is now guarding 2 squares, and white is only guarding 1. So black is guarding twice as much squares with pawns on this file as white is. Same thing over here. Now, there are, advantages for white in terms of things they're guarding. For example, white has 1 on this file, and black has basically no pawns on that file. However, you can look at the usefulness of each file. There's really nothing to do on this file, and this is the one open file in the game. So for white, black gets already the gift of the F file. So like here, the rook can come in and the knight can come in. They can attack things or come in here and have the rook just backing up the knight. So that's the gift that this pawn gives this rook. So this rook's like, thank you. And then when white comes in to grab this one, notice that this pawn is going to obstruct the knight move here. It's going to obstruct the knight move here. And it's just going to hold back these knights. So one thing to assess with doubled pawns is, are the squares that they're now guarding useful for your opponent? Would your opponent want to live there? Your opponent wouldn't want to live there in the first place. Like you're taking away like a desert wasteland spot, then it's like, why guard that? But if you're taking away valuable knight outposts, ways for them to double their rooks, then it gets a little better. We can kind of see this in the same variation with the Roy Lopez exchange. So when I did this variation earlier, I first like harped on the black position and talked about why it was difficult for them. But now I want you to look at this position again. With the pieces traded, it's annoying. However, with the pieces on the board, this is white's one open file. And yet again, we see the pawns just kind of blocking it up and not letting white move forward very easily on the one file. Therefore, black's going to have an easier time on that file than white, just like from a theoretical perspective, as long as there are rooks on the game. If the rooks vanish, then white is very happy because, of course, the extra open file, the mitigation of the power of the open file are all off the table. And that's why in this position, black shouldn't be just trading willy-nilly, and white should be trading willy-nilly because every trade kind of gets them closer to their goal. A final consideration is that doubled pawns on open files are harder to defend because they can be attacked more easily. So if white's pawn was missing, these pawns would be worse because when this pawn moved up, this could die to a rook. And generally speaking, rook pawn doubled pawns are not as bad because this rook pawn right now is, a knight pawn doubled pawn, if you can turn the rook pawn into a knight pawn. So like if somehow, I don't know, let's do it like this. Like here, black plays knight here, bishop goes back for some reason, and then knight here, pawn takes. These are mitigated, but this rook is like, woo, look at me. And this pawn can only attack one, but this is like, he's given a Thanos monologue. He's like, I can feel the power. Twice as strong. And this one's like, I'm still kind of behind you. But like long term, this one is twice as strong, twice the attacking potential as a rook pawn. So it kind of got promoted, not to like a knight or queen, but to a knight pawn. So it got knighted in this process. And if a pawn kind of gets knighted from rook pawn to knight pawn, it's generally a good idea. So let's kind of end this with just a question. See if like knowing all that, let's see if you can spot whether doubled pawns would be good or bad or both. And I'm going to give you a few questions. So like, let's first start with like a Roulettes. Sorry, an Italian game. And we'll do like a main line. Okay, so here, should white take the bishop? Is that neutral, slightly better for white, slightly better for black? What do you think? You can pause the video if you want. And my answer is, it's not a great move to take. Because if they take, the pawn gets knighted. Woo! Double the fun. And the rook is like, I can see, Care Bear stare. And this might not look like a threat, but the point is the bishop and the rook are going to have to babysit that all game. And the rook can, like, at any point, move its Eye of Sauron over to another side of the board, but just like right now, it's just staring, and things can't come over here. So if the knight wants to come over here later, it's just going to snap it off. It restricts a lot of the white mobility as a result of being good. And so I would say generally, even though there is some restriction here, it's good, and there's no pawn difference in terms of like majority over here to whites. All the pawns are connected. There's no centerfold line, so it's mainly good. Okay, let's look at another variation from the Caro-Kann, a really popular line. It goes e4, c6, d4, d5, knight d2, pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn, and knight f6. Okay, so what are, and instead of asking whether they're good or bad, let's just say black takes this way. What are the pros and the cons of black's pawns here? Pause the video. Okay, so I hope you got this. The cons are that they're on a majority where white will just win the endgame because they'll be able to create a pass pawn over here, but black won't be able to create a pass pawn on their side. The advantage to them, and the reason why this is like the mainline Caro-Kann, is because the one open file white has, black has double the pressure down, and so they're very good at mitigating that. While at the same time, black has an extra file to begin the game, aimed right at the d-pawn, creating some defensive liability that black frankly doesn't have. There's nothing for white to attack. So while the pieces are on, black can like attack things and use the extra file and also have some like piece mitigation. So for example, if like knight f3, bishop e6, if white wanted to go attack the bishop, it's not happening. This pawn is going to totally block out this knight. And if you instead say like, well, I'm not going to put it on f3, I'm going to put it on e2, fine, but it's kind of sad, right? You have to put the knight on e2 instead of f3. And so you can already see the effect of that like mitigation that the black pawns are getting. Whether it's an advantage for black or an advantage for white, just depends on the follow-up. But what's most important is if you understand like what you gave up, what you sacrificed, and what you gained, then you can play the resulting positions with a little more accuracy. So hopefully that's given you a very advanced understanding of doubled pawns. They're not as simple as they're often taught in the early stages. There's always pros and cons in terms of attack, in terms of defense, in terms of in-game play that I hope you learned from this. So if you like this video, please leave comments for future videos. Tell me, like, we want more opening videos, in-game videos. Like, what's your jam? I'm happy to do it now I'm done with the speed run. I already have like a request for like more slow games against like 2400s in the Philidor and Old Indian, which I'm happy to do. But I already wrote courses on those that are more centralized on the opening. So anything is really fair game. And if you don't mind liking, commenting, subscribing, that all makes the YouTube algorithm really happy. If it's not trouble, like I don't, not a hard sell. It doesn't relate. I'm not devastated if you can't do it. I'm just grateful that you watched in the first place, and I'm doing this for fun. But if you don't mind, I would love more subscriptions. And thank you very much.